Hello, hello. Gotta have this 1, 2, 3, 4. This one I like. I try 'em out. Podcast, mix music, mix news, mix news, mix news, mix news, mix news, mix news, mix news.
Is the US experiencing a brain drain? Since President Donald Trump retook office, the state of scientific research in the
They can go and get fuck off. They can go and get fuck off. Fucky, fucky, sucky, sucky. Anything goes.
states has been, well, precarious to say the least. The administration immediately implemented a federal spending freeze, so that included government-funded grants, and has proposed billions of dollars in cuts to science and health research. That's billions with a B. It's just so hard to keep up with all of this, and it's not even been 6 months. The silver lining is that other countries like Australia are taking advantage of the situation and targeting programs at US researchers. ABC Health reporter Olivia Willis has been looking into this, and she joins me now. So, Liv, what's the latest out of the States when it comes to research funding?
So since Trump's return to office in January, there's been, as you say, a real frenzy of government funding freezes, cuts, executive orders, all of which have had a major impact on scientific and medical research, on national science and health agencies in the US, but also science and health funding in many parts of the world that are reliant on US funding, and that includes researchers in Australia. We know that so far, well over 1,000 research grants have been terminated at government agencies, including the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, and NASA. Together, those total several billions of dollars. And there's many more grants that have also been flagged for review. And then on top of that, hundreds of staff have been cut from some of these federal agencies that I mentioned, as well as the Centers for Disease Control, the FDA. And the Trump administration has also targeted specific universities, many of which are Ivy League schools, places like Harvard and Columbia, and frozen their federal funding if they don't comply with a set of demands that the government has laid out. And they're often things related to affirmative action, diversity initiatives, campus protests, and so on. Big picture, for next year, the White House budget, their proposal now is to cut the National Institutes of Health, their budget by 40%, and the National Science Foundation's budget by 55%. So very, very significant. I will say that thinking broadly about these cuts, the government has said that they're essentially about eliminating waste and bias in government-funded research. But I think, they're also the result of efforts to combat what the Trump administration has described as gender ideology, and an executive order to end diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So we know that many of the cancelled grants or grants under review focus on marginalised and underrepresented groups, racial and ethnic minorities, so groups that have been largely understudied historically. And the Trump administration perhaps doesn't see this type of research as benefiting broadly the health of all Americans.
What other areas have faced cuts?
There's also research areas that have lost funding simply because they're not priorities of the Trump administration, or I guess the government doesn't see them as fitting in with their own scientific agenda. So things like research into vaccine misinformation, HIV/AIDS, climate science, clean energy. I should note that this is a really fast-moving situation and things will probably change. So we know that a number of lawsuits have been launched against the government regarding these funding freezes and cuts. Some of them have been successful. Just a couple of weeks ago, a federal judge ruled that the cancellation of more than $1 billion in research grants at the National Institutes of Health, that they were illegal in order for them to be reinstated. It looks like the government will file an appeal on that judgment. But in the meantime, staff at certain agencies have been instructed not to cancel any further grants. So it's definitely a fast-moving, unfolding, dynamic situation.
And may get dragged through the courts for months and months to come.
I think so.
What have these cuts done to researchers?
Well, I think it's probably important to think about the context of how significant the US is as a player in research funding globally. So it's one of the biggest funders in the world of research and development. The National Institutes of Health alone is the biggest funder of medical research globally. A huge number of researchers around the world would benefit of funding from that agency. And in 2023, it was estimated that the US actually provided 30% of all global R&D funding. So you can get a sense there from just how much they contribute to what those cuts would mean. In terms of specific research fields, we're seeing areas of research, I guess, that have been threatened because huge chunks of their funding have been wiped out. And then for the researchers and the people who work at these federal agencies, a lot of people have lost their jobs or their funding. That, of course, includes principal investigators and professors, but also early career researchers, PhD students, people who rely on scholarships. And I think the other thing is that for many scientists, it appears to have really created, I guess, a climate of fear and worry about their jobs and the viability of their research long term.
You're listening to Belinda Smith on The Science Show, and I'm talking to health reporter Olivia Willis about the state of research funding in the United States. Now, I've seen reports of countries that are seeing this as an opportunity for them to really beef up their local scientific expertise and try and get that US talent to relocate to their countries and establish their research programs there.
Oh, naughty boy, naughty boy, naughty boy, naughty boy. Only go back, it cuts it. I thought you can go back and still listen to it. Naughty boy.
ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music, and more.
Hi, News Daily listeners. I'm Erin Park, and I wanted to share with you my new podcast, Expanse, Nowhere Man. In 1999, a young American with everything to live for walked out alone into one of the deadliest deserts in Australia. Why did he do it? And why do some people have to lose themselves in the wilderness in order to feel found? Subscribe to Expanse, Nowhere Man on the ABC Listen app and all the usual places.
The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, has set his sights on tax reform, which will be the centrepiece of a meeting of the nation's best policy minds next month. But is a big shake-up of the tax system even possible in the current political climate? Today, the ABC's finance expert, Alan Kohler, on why these experts would be better off talking about artificial intelligence and even a hike to the GST instead. I'm Sydney Peed on Gadigal Land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Alan, the government's Economic Reform Roundtable is next month, and no doubt you're very excited about that. Just tell me first, what is this Talkfest and who's coming to it?
So it's going to be in the Cabinet Room. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, hasn't said exactly how many people are coming, but he has said that there's 25 seats around the table. So whether there's going to be some people standing up for 3 days behind them, I don't know. The 10 initial invitees include Daniel Wood, the chair of the Productivity Commission. Then there's 4 people from the ACTU. But 2 of them will be attending as alternates to the Secretary and the President. So the Secretary, Sally McManus, is coming, and the President, Michelle O'Neill. There's also the head of the Business Council, the head of the Chamber of Commerce, the head of the Australian Industry Group, and the head of the Small Business Organisations of Australia group. So that's 4 people from business organisations, plus Cassandra Goldie, head of the Australian Council of Social Services, and that's the 10. So far.
Right, okay. So these sessions are supposed to be focused on 3 priorities: productivity, budget sustainability, and economic resilience. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, is excited about it. He's even signalled bold tax reform could be discussed.
Now, no sensible progress can be made on productivity, resilience, or budget sustainability without proper consideration of more tax reform. I don't just accept that, I welcome that.
Alan, in an ideal world, how ambitious should these participants be when it comes to fixing the tax system? How broken is it?
Well, it's pretty broken. The last time we had a look at it was Ken Henry in 2010, commissioned by Kevin Rudd, and he produced a massive report on the future tax system, which was almost entirely rejected. And the only bit of it that was used was the introduction of a minerals tax, which ended up being repealed. So, look, I don't think there's any kind of expectation that that sort of thing's going to happen. When Jim Chalmers talks about budget sustainability being the...
You can have tax for the food, tax for cigarettes, tax for alcohol, tax for different names, different tax, I think. All different types.
being the goal of tax reform, presumably that means more tax.
I am personally willing to grasp the nettle, to use an old saying. I am prepared to do my bit. The government is prepared to do its bit. And what we'll find out in the course of the next few months is whether everyone is prepared to do their bit as well.
So the question from the tax reform part of the discussion, it seems to me, is going to revolve around what's going to be the extra tax. Are they going to bring in a new tax, or are they going to increase an existing tax, i.e. the GST? Or are they going to have a go at something like an inheritance tax, which a lot of countries have, or a wealth tax, which some countries have got as well? Look, my view is that I don't think Anthony Albanese is going to let him do anything particularly bold, because the Prime Minister has made it clear that, he's not interested in big shake-ups.
But the government's already making some changes, right? Like it's planned to increase tax for people with superannuation balances above $3 million.
Look, that's pretty small. It's a sort of a toe in the water of a wealth tax, and everyone's complaining that it's on unrealised gains, which is basically if the value of your super fund increases, even though you don't sell anything and haven't made cash gains, you still have to pay the tax. It's on gains that haven't been realised. And everyone's whinging like mad about that. And it's really the first time that Australia has had a go at that kind of unrealised gain tax. And Jim Chalmers is saying they're going to stick with that. They're not going to make any changes to it. And so he's kind of staring down the opponents of it at this stage. But it's a fairly small thing. It's not going to raise a lot of money. It's certainly not going to get the budget back into surplus.
And tax reform, it's always a tricky business because there's always winners and there's always losers. So if rewriting the tax system is a bit too hard for this round table, you've got another suggestion that they could be talking about instead artificial intelligence. So why is that so important? Because there are some big moves on AI in China and the US worth taking note of, right?
Well, yeah, that's right. So look, in my view, most of the discussion about productivity needs to focus on artificial intelligence, because we're in the middle of this, what's clearly a revolution in technology that China is well ahead of virtually everyone else on. The United States is also having a go at. President Trump's having, on July the 23rd, he's having what he calls AI Action Day, which is going to be a whole series of executive orders designed to regulate or mainly promote the use of artificial intelligence in the United States. So that's happening. That's 3 weeks before the roundtable. I think that they should have a look at what the United States is doing and have a talk about, whether we should do the same thing, and what bits of that should we pick up and what shouldn't we pick up. I mean, they need to think about what does Australia have to do to get us using AI in such a way that improves productivity.
And you had a couple of ideas here. One of them was to develop a national system for helping small and medium businesses get their employees to write better AI prompts. Can you just tell me about that?
I'm not by no means an AI expert, but from what I understand, there are kind of two ways for companies to use AI. One is top-down, one's bottom-up. Top-down involves the CEO deciding to bring AI in to do a function and basically replace workers. So it might be doing the call centre, it might be doing data entry, and that's basically a replacement of human beings. The bottom-up way is where people who are working for the company use AI to improve their own efficiency and productivity. And a lot of that comes down to how good you are at writing a prompt for the AI. The question is, what can the government do to help small businesses to better use AI? Can the government set up some sort of prompt writing advice centre that would help people do that? Or
so it can be used more effectively.
yeah, and I thought that was pretty interesting.
I guess the other issue is the fear around people losing their jobs. So one of these other ideas is to modernise the welfare safety net. Can you just tell me a bit about that?
Well, so at the moment we've got a system called JobSeeker, which has a certain amount of money, which is clearly, everyone says is not enough, clearly not enough. And also it has a mutual obligation system. And so in order to qualify for JobSeeker, you have to keep applying for jobs. That system's been around a long time and it sort of predates AI. The question is, will AI now result in a large amount of permanent unemployment? There's a lot of opinions both ways about this. A lot of people say, well, everyone will find another job. Previous technological revolutions in history have not resulted in long-term permanent unemployment. And it is true that, we've got a lot of robots in the world and unemployment is in Australia 4.1%. So it's not as if the robots that are there have caused a large amount of unemployment. But I think there is a fair bit of fear as to, well, what happens if there is the sort of big increase in unemployment as a result of AI, and so people are scared of it. And I think that's understandable. What is possible is some kind of safety net for people thrown out of work by AI. How that might work, I don't know. I mean, it's difficult. Can you sort of separate off people who lose their jobs because of AI? You probably can't. How would you fund it? Could you fund it with a tax on AI? The problem with that is that you want to encourage the use of AI. You don't want to tax it. Taxing something discourages its use. So you want to actually, if anything, you want to lower the tax on AI so that people are more inclined to use it, so that productivity improves. So, it's kind of difficult to get your head around. But I guess that's what you get 25 smart people in a room for.
Yeah, that's right. So they could potentially strike the right balance there and improve the economy and productivity at the same time through AI. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about what other changes could come out of this roundtable. There's one change you think might be possible to try, which could balance the budget and look after more people. But a lot of people will hate hearing this from you, Alan. We should perhaps raise the GST. And by how much?
Well, look, it clearly does need to be more tax revenue. We've been through this before. In 1985, Bob Hawke and Paul Keating held a tax summit because there wasn't enough tax revenue, and they went to that tax summit with three proposals. One was the GST, another was the capital gains tax, and the third thing was fringe benefits tax. And the tax summit happened in 85, and two of those three things got up. The GST did not. Treasury also said the same thing to John Howard in 1998 and said, you've got to have a GST. And so he went back on his promise not to have a GST. So we got one in 2000 because tax revenue fell short, and now it's fallen short again. So the question is, do we come up with another new tax as we did in 85 and 2000, or do we basically just increase the ones we've got? And everyone's agreed that we've got too much tax revenue coming out of income taxes. I'm not sure this is right, but anyway, it seems to be a consensus view. Then you need to also have a lower company tax rate because company taxes are coming down around the world, and you kind of lose companies. They move. The only thing left really is GST, and the average GST around the world is between 15 and 20%. So increasing our GST from 10 to 15% would not be out of line with the rest of the world. Also, we've excluded a lot of stuff like food, and so the proposal would be to increase the rate and to broaden the base so that you pick up more things. The problem with the GST is that it's regressive, not progressive like income taxes. That is to say, it affects poor people much more than the well-off because they tend to spend more of their income on things that are subject to GST. So how would you make it less regressive? And Richard Holden and Rosalind Dixon, who are professors at the UNSW in Sydney, came up with an idea, which is that you have a tax-free threshold of GST. They proposed $12,000 a year, $1,000 a month. So all spending up to that amount per year would be GST free.
And so what the taxpayer would then get that money back each year.
Well, that was the idea. I mean, I rang Richard Holden up and said, how would you do that? How can the government possibly know what each person is spending? And the answer is, he said, well, you don't have to know. You just give back the GST on that $12,000, which is $1,800. He reckons it should be in 2 lots of 900. So every 6 months you get a lump of $900 in your bank account. It just means that you're getting back the GST you've paid on the first $12,000 of your spending each year. And I think that's a very interesting proposal.
Yeah. Something that they could talk about at the round table, perhaps.
Well, he reckons that you'd end up with a net extra $45 billion in revenue, which you could use to cut income taxes as well as balance the budget.
Okay. Many voters would say the government does just need to balance the budget and spend less. Is that an option?
Well, of course they say that. And yes, that's good in theory, but really it's the community, it's Australian society that puts the demands on the government. The big things are not that available to change. We've got the NDIS now, and it's the Australian community has decided to look after disabled people better than we have in the past. Now, I think that the growth in the NDIS is keeping the Treasurer and Treasury awake at night because it's growing too quickly. But no one's suggesting any big cuts in the NDIS, and they're not going to cut the age pension, and they're not going to cut healthcare in general, because apart from anything else, the population is ageing. Actually, healthcare costs are going to increase inevitably. There's nothing they can do about it. And now also there's pressure to increase defence spending. We've agreed to this AUKUS thing where we're going to spend billions of dollars on nuclear submarines. So look, I just think that the pressure on the budget is such that there's nothing they can do about it. Really, the only thing they can do is increase tax revenue. But look, all of the business group representatives, business council, etc., at the round table will say that, oh no, you've got to cut spending. And so they'll end up having an argument that'll last all day about that and just waste time.
When they should be talking about AI after all.
I think so, that's right.
Alan, thanks so much.
Not at all.
Alan Cole.
So press back.
Well, it is time for My Two Cents, which is our segment where we're asking those questions that you'd rather not answer about money. Over the last few weeks, you've learned about financial journalist Alan Kohler's $700,000 business breakdown and how going into debt actually helped musician Ben Lee's career. Today, is it raining cash in ABC weather presenter Nate Byrne's world?
My name's Nate Byrne, and I make money by being ridiculously adorable on television. Oh, I'm also the weatherman. My last 3 purchases were a video game, 3 litres of milk, and coffee, which means that I'm a caffeinated, very strong-boned gamer. When I got my first pay, I spent it on a magazine, because back in the day, you kind of had to do that in order to get photos of famous people, and I wanted a poster to stick on my wall. When I was growing up, money was tight. It was every cent was counted and accounted for, and we really had no extra to go around. So we always talked about money as quite openly in my family, and it was always something to be reserved and carefully monitored. The biggest thing I've had to unlearn about money as an adult is that it's actually okay to spend it. I am a chronic saver, and I still do that to this day. I don't make many purchases at all. I'm pretty tight with my money. I like to spend it on experiences, but one of the ones I probably most regret, I've got a killer pair of high heels that look amazing, but completely destroyed my feet running up Oxford Street this year. I have a very lucky housing situation. I've got a partner who I pay lots of money to stay with, but I don't act chilly rent. I am on the lookout for a house. Do you know of a bargain? The biggest lie I tell myself about money is that it's really kind of scary and that it's something you have to hoard. I don't know, for some reason, investing feels like gambling, and I know that's not right exactly, but it's a really hard thing to shake. The last time I worried about my bank balance was a really long time ago. I've been very, very lucky, but maybe in the weekend when I left the Royal Australian Navy on the Friday and was starting with the ABC on the Monday, because it was just the most uncertain I'd ever been that I was going to have a job. I was 2 days unemployed. That was terrifying. I use a credit card all the time. I have a tiny little amount that you can put on it, but I kind of get up to there every few weeks and then just put a little bit of extra money on it. I do that because I want the points. I get points. See, I love collecting things. Points are like money. The more you have, the better. I also never spend my points on anything. I've got like 500,000 frequent flyers for some reason. When it comes to money and family, I've really tried my whole adult life to avoid being given anything by my parents. It was a matter of pride. I even got to a point when I was at university, I'd moved out of home and I was making decisions between putting petrol into my moped or buying food rather than asking my parents for help. The biggest decision I've ever had to make about money is being made as we speak. I finally got a deposit together for a house and I am fighting with myself because, that bank account has been going up and up and up slowly for so long now. I'm terrified to see it go back down, but I know it'll be for the best. So I'm literally in this decision right now. Check back in later. My financial goals are not to be rich and wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. I just want to be safe and comfortable and to be able to look after my friends and family as best I can. But if I was to become rich, that would be amazing. I would probably end up giving half of it away though, because I think if you've got a lot of money, there's a lot of good you could do in the world. If I won the lottery, I would still rock up to be on ABC News Breakfast the next morning, and the morning after, and the morning after that. I think I'd probably get a weather wall installed in my home though, so I could do a work from home once in a while. I'm Nate Byrne, and that's my 2 cents.
So to Nate Byrne's bosses at ABC Breakfast, if you're listening, he's committed. That's good to know. Good luck with the house hunt, Nate. And thank you to ABC weather presenter Nate Byrne for sharing your 2 cents. And thank you for your texts on our little 1-2 punch of financial advice that we've just been giving you. One person texts saying, I'm the nan. Parents need to tell their kids we can't afford it and explain why. Another person says, I believe many young people need to learn the maths to make better financial decisions so that they can compare products, payment plans, fees and charges.
Wants me to log in. Okay, get out. Get out of that one.
Trillions and trillions. Bitcoin headed for a big July as Trump and Fed create perfect crypto price storm. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies have become a $3.4 trillion market this year. ASU. As President Donald Trump helps drive the Bitcoin price with a wild crypto prediction. Front-run Donald Trump, the White House and Wall Street by subscribing now to Forbes Crypto Asset and Blockchain Advisor, where you can uncover blockchain blockbusters poised for 1,000% plus gains. The Bitcoin price is nearing its all-time high of $112,000 per Bitcoin, bouncing back from April lows of $75,000, with markets braced for a Federal Reserve flip. Now, as a legendary billionaire has said he expects global de-dollarization to catapult the Bitcoin price higher. Traders are eyeing what Trump's crypto czar David Sachs has said will be a big July. While the Federal Reserve is under pressure to cut interest rates and unleash the trillions and trillions of dollars that are on the sidelines. Sign up now for the free Crypto Codex, a daily 5-minute newsletter for traders, investors, and the crypto curious that will get you up to date and keep you ahead of the Bitcoin and crypto market bull run. Forbes: a huge BlackRock crypto bombshell suddenly hurtling toward Bitcoin at key price turning point. July will be a big month, Sachs posted to X, adding that he's expecting a bill signing for the Stablecoin Genius Act and the Crypto Market Structure Clarity Act going to the Senate. President Trump supports clarity on market structure as well as genius on stablecoins, Sachs posted. Let's get this done. The Trump administration has fast-tracked crypto legislation, rushing to pass bills that would legitimize dollar-pegged stablecoins and carve up the Bitcoin and crypto market between regulators after companies and developers complained for years they've been left in limbo. Earlier this month, the Senate passed the Genius Act that would establish a regulatory framework for stablecoins, legitimizing their use for issuers and custodians. Trump said he expected that the Genius Act to lead to massive crypto investment once if it's passed by the House of Representatives. Trump's support of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies more broadly has flourished since he returned to the White House in January. Last week, Trump said Bitcoin is taking a lot of pressure off the dollar, and it is a great thing for our country, during a press conference. Adding Bitcoin has become amazing. The US dollar index, which measures its performance against 6 other major currencies, is on track for its biggest drop in the first 6 months of a year since the era of free-floating currencies began in the early 1970s. Sign up now for Crypto Codex, a free, daily newsletter for the crypto-curious. Forbes: serious dollar collapse fear drives huge $5 trillion 2030 Bitcoin price. Prediction to rival Nvidia and Microsoft by Billy Bambrow. Meanwhile, Powell, who Trump has repeatedly attacked for his commitment to holding interest rates steady even as inflation falls toward its 2% target, is under increasing pressure to lower rates. Jerome Powell is in an increasingly untenable situation because he will be looked at as politicizing the office of the Federal Reserve, Investor Chamath Polyhapedia said during an episode of Thielen Podcast, which he hosts alongside crypto czar David Sachs and fellow investors David Fredburn and Jason Calacanis. Look at how much money is sitting in money market funds. You have trillions and trillions of dollars of dry powder on the sidelines that will need to find a home. Bitcoin and crypto analysts are generally feeling upbeat about the market's outlook as policy, macro, and funding factors align. The setup for Bitcoin remains compelling, Matt Mina, crypto research strategist at 21 Shares, said in emailed comments. A clean break above $110,000 could trigger a fast move to $120,000, putting our $138,500 summer target within reach. With policy, macro, and flows aligning, Bitcoin may be setting up for a bullish end to the year, where a push toward $200,000 is no longer just a long shot, but a growing probability.
Shit.
Apple iPhone 17 Pro Max. New leak confirms major design upgrade. Updated July 5th with more details and commentary on the expected battery size increase for the iPhone 17 Pro Max. A new leak suggests that this fall's Apple iPhone 17 Pro Max, expected in September. Read this for exactly when, will have a bigger capacity battery than any iPhone has ever seen. More details have now emerged as to what this will mean. A new post has appeared from a Weibo user called Instant Digital, whose track record isn't perfect but has leaked some accurate information in the past. So is worth listening to. Forbes: Apple iPhone 16 Pro and iPhone 16 Pro Max prices slashed further in major sale on now. According to the leak, the iPhone 17 Pro Max battery could be as big as around 5,000 mAh, which is bigger than the current biggest iPhone battery. In the iPhone 16 Pro Max, which measures 4,676 mAh. It's long been rumored that the iPhone 17 Pro Max will be thicker than before, and it's been hoped that some of this extra space would be used to increase the battery size, and this new post corroborates that. The iPhone 16 Pro Max is 8.25mm thick, and it's thought its successor will be 8.725mm thick. That's less than half a millimeter more, so let's hope it stays comfortable in the hand. But even such a slender increase could have a noticeable effect on the iPhone's battery life. Of course, each new iPhone has new features, all of which could affect battery life. On the other hand, the expected new processor for the Pro Max could combine with greater efficiencies in software which could expand battery life. But the surest way to make a device last longer is a bigger battery, and it seems that could be on the way. Even though users love new features, battery life stubbornly remains as about the top request. After all, even if your phone can do extraordinary new things, it's not much use if it's collapsed by lunchtime each day. According to 9to5Mac, depending on how close to 5,000 the final number ends up being, we could be looking at almost a 10% increase in capacity. It's important to note, however, that a battery's capacity doesn't have a one correlation with battery life improvements, it says. Meanwhile, Mac Rumors suggests what it might mean. The battery life of the iPhone 16 Pro Max is 33 hours, according to Apple. This is up from 29 hours on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and 28 hours on the iPhone 13 Pro Max. The iPhone 12 Pro Max had a battery life of just 20 hours. With an extra 300 mAh of battery capacity, the iPhone 17 Pro Max could be on course to offer around 35 hours of battery life, or perhaps even more, it reports. William Gallagher at Apple Insider has a different take on the battery change. The brand estimates that the new battery will have about 324 mAh more than the iPhone 16 Pro Max. However, even if the new figure and the earlier physical size rumors are correct, it does not follow that the iPhone 17 Pro Max will have longer battery life. That's because it depends on the rest of the iPhone 17 Pro Max design. The new model is expected to add new technology that will not impact the battery, such as vapor chamber cooling, but there may be other new features that do, the report says. Forbes Apple iPhone 17 Pro. New leak suggests startling change by David Phelan. Elon Musk bashes Republican bill. It will harm Americans. Here's why. The federal government is continuing to do what it has done for decades, spending more than it collects. Though this may not be surprising, it should be alarming. Why? Because as the national debt continues to rise, the government will be required to pay more and more of its revenue to service the debt. This will leave less money for everything else, such as benefits for many Americans in dealing with the next crisis. The last federal government balanced budget. The federal government's fiscal year ends September 30th, 2025. The budget deficit is expected to be about $2.2 trillion. With Washington spending at such high levels, is a balanced budget even possible? The last time the federal government balanced its budget was during the Clinton administration, when Republicans controlled both houses of Congress. This occurred between September 30th, 1997 and 9/30th, 2001. The average budget surplus during this time was $139.8 billion. Since then, and especially since the global pandemic, federal spending has exploded while revenue has lagged. The last federal budget surplus prior to 1997 occurred in 1969, when Democrats controlled both sides of Congress. Going back to the federal budget of 1901, Congress has had a budget surplus in only 31 of the past 124 years, 25%, and in 4 of the past 55 years, 7%. Based on the recently passed budget in the House, it's clear that neither party is willing to take the difficult action necessary to bring the federal budget back in line. It was assumed that DOGE would bring financial salvation to Washington, but the waste, fraud, and abuse proved to be less than anticipated. In fact, Elon Musk just voiced his disgust on X, formerly Twitter, over the current bill awaiting Senate approval. He wrote, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it." Those are harsh words from the man who started the DOGE effort. Federal budget surplus deficit since 1990. For decades, Democrats were widely considered to be the party of excessive spending. Today, it appears that Republicans are equally culpable. For a more thorough look, let's examine the following chart, which shows the annual budget surpluses and deficits in each fiscal year from 1990 to 2024. The chart also contains a projection of deficits from 2025 through 2034. Note that the future numbers are derived from the recommended levels for overall spending limits, revenue targets, and deficit levels for the period 2025 through 2034, included in the bill H. Con. Res. .14. The chart can be divided into 4 distinct segments of time, including the last time the federal government budget had a surplus, the deficits resulting from the financial crisis and COVID-19, and the recommended deficit levels over the next 10 years. It's interesting to note how the deficit swelled during the 2 most recent crises and how spending remained elevated afterwards. This is because once Congress expands spending, it rarely reduces spending after an event has passed. Let's take a closer look at this. The largest deficit prior to the financial crisis was $412.2 billion in the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2004. Using the largest deficit prior to the financial crisis as a baseline, the smallest deficit since then was $441.9 billion, which occurred in FY ending September 30th, 2015. The deficit reached a whopping $1.4 trillion in FY ending September 30th, 2009, and an even larger shortfall of $3.13 trillion in FY ending September 30th, 2020. As the chart clearly demonstrates, deficits have been extreme in the years following the financial crisis. In short, every deficit since the financial crisis has been worse than the largest deficit prior to the crisis. It's clear that Congress has a spending problem. Federal budget overview. Currently, interest payments on the national debt are the third largest budget expense, surpassing defense spending. The interest expense on the debt is about $1.026 trillion in the current fiscal year. The only budget items larger than servicing the debt are Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. As the national debt continues higher, and especially if interest rates rise, servicing the debt could surpass Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid to become the largest item in the federal budget. At that point, it will become increasingly difficult to service the debt. If the one big, beautiful bill is passed by both houses, the national debt is expected to rise even further. While DOGE worked to reduce federal spending, this bill will increase spending, leading to even larger deficits, which will be added to the national debt. It's clear that a reduction in federal spending will require a great deal of courage, focus, and cooperation from both parties. Will Congress become fiscally responsible? Not to sound pessimistic, but that doesn't appear likely. Why? Because doing so will cause a degree of economic pain, and if the resulting anger is directed at either party, that party will likely suffer at the polls. Therefore, this problem needs to be addressed by both parties, and in this divisive time, cooperation seems highly unlikely.
Okay. Okay, that's all I got. I'm going, I think. I'm getting tired. I'm out of it. See you later. Adios.